Welcome everyone to our webinar today on mental health. I'm Torsten, past chair of IYCN, and I want to first of all welcome you all for joining, and I will start with a short introduction about what the IYCN is before we start with the webinar. So the International Younger Chemists Network is a network of early career chemists with the vision to connect and empower younger chemists globally. And we support and advocate for younger scientists across the chemical sciences towards a globally sustainable future. We are present on the entire world essentially, and membership to the IYCN is free for any early career chemists. The IYCN has been an associated organization of IOPAC since 2017 and has been integrated this year as an IOPAC committee. And we collaborate with IOPAC on a number of relevant projects, and IOPAC supports IYCN in their daily business. And we organize a number of different projects. One of them is, for example, a mentoring program where we match more experienced senior or mid-career chemists with early career chemists. And we have been also running for the past years an outreach competition focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. Another area that has been starting over the past years are activities towards science for policy, where we have had recently a webinar and also published a few point article. The IYCN has been over the past years very active also by presence at conferences, but also particularly on online events by organizing our own webinars, for example, on women leadership, or we have a global conversation on sustainability, which is focused on sustainability. We have also running a webinar series which is called IYCN Science Cafe, which is focused on IOPAC's top 10 emerging technologies. And on the 27th of October, we are organizing the first online international conference, which is also focused on the top 10 emerging technologies. IYCN is being majorly supported by IOPAC and Merck KGaA Germany. And if you are interested in the network and what we do, you can follow us on social media. We will also soon relaunch our webpage, and if you can also become a member. But now I want to actually get started with our webinar today, which is on how to manage mental health stories and tips from early career scientists, for which we have three brilliant speakers here today. And I'm here together with Fatima Mustafa, who will now take over the moderation.
Thank you, Torsten. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And big thank you for all of our speakers who actually joined us today, this morning or this evening, depends on from where they are joining. So the motivations towards this webinar was initially a couple of years ago when Lieke, who's actually one of the presenters here with us, was proposing this topic when we were working together in the conference and presence team in the IYCN. So finally it's over here. We have this event as well as upcoming, hopefully, a couple of articles and based on IYCN surveys done on IYCN members. So thank you everyone again for joining. The motivation towards this topic is, as always, as scientists from all sectors, graduate students, postdoctorals, early careers, and government, industry, academia, we all have had ups and downs, and times we actually can kind of struggle as well. So we do have a lot of failing experiments more than successful experiments. We do have the culture of publish or perish in academia, which kind of also let us encounter kind of burdens at some point. We have long working hours. We have sometimes competitive working environments, and at some point lack of job security. So all of these could let us encounter some of kind of stress, anxiety, mental health issues, and so on and so on, plus additionally to other life events. So with that, we wanted to have this event to hear from scientists and early career scientists particularly about their own stories, how they actually were able to cope along these challenges, as well how they were able to seek help and how they actually can help others. And I know most of all of them, actually, they are like a very big mental health advocates. So for today's event, we do have initially Dr. Loriana Valentier, who is going to be presenting half an hour a training kind of workshop about building resilience. And then we will be having 10 minutes talk by Lieke van Gisel, who are actually a graduate student, and she will definitely tell us her journey coping with mental health issues and how she became a big advocate for mental health as well. And finally, we'll be concluding with a talk from Azmi Ahmed, who will also be talking about his efforts in this field. At the end, we will have an open discussion, a Q&A session for half an hour. So for all of our attendees, feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A section. And also, we also have kind of a handout which is related to the first talk of building resilience. So feel free as well to retrieve that and have a look at it. For that, let me introduce our first speaker. And our first speaker is Dr. Loriana Valentier. Thank you again, Loriana, for being with us. She is actually an analytical chemist by training, and she worked with industry, government, as well as in higher education and academia. She is actually the founder of an organization called Radiant Journey, where she delivers customized personal and professional development for scientists and engineers. She's like a trainer in this field. She created and delivered resilience and professional development programs to hundreds of scientists and engineers, empowering them to heal and grow while maintaining a high level of performance. She got her bachelor degree from SUNY Fredonia and her master and PhD from Binghamton University, and she's here with us today to educating us about how to become more resilient while still doing high level of performance science. Thank you, Loriana.
Thank you so much, Fatima. I just need to share my screen, and I do not see the option anymore for that.
Here you go.
Oh, there we go. Great. Thank you. So can you see it?
Not yet. Maybe in the way.
Okay, let me see. I have. Oh, sorry, just a moment. Let me try again. Is it there now?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, okay. It's showing up in my preview, so wonderful. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Fatima, for that wonderful introduction. And I really, what you said resonated with me about being a scientist and the high expectations that we have, because the work that we do is high impact, right? It's very important. And it's how we share our gifts with the world. But we also want to maintain a perspective about that work so that we can maintain good mental health. And as Fatima mentioned, I've worked in government, industry, and now I'm in higher ed with the consulting work through Radiant Journey. And one of the things that came through for me through all of those areas is that area of mental health, particularly when I worked at the crime lab. I worked there for 7 years, and it became clear that many resources were needed for scientists in that nature of work. So that's sort of how everything began and got the ball rolling with this work. So I'm going to go ahead and start us out with a poll. So I think the poll is engaged. If not, you can go ahead and enter your answers into the chat. But on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your stress levels? So, oh, we lost our presentation. There it is. Okay. Oops. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. I apologize. So you can go ahead and share that. And I'm just going to try to just ensure that this stays. Can you see the
Yes, we can see the slide, but there is like another web page in the background.
Okay, let
We can see it.
let me redo that then as the full screen then. I apologize for that, technical issues. Okay, so there's our poll on a scale of 1 to 3. So I'm going to go ahead and share mine. Mine has definitely been moderate for this week. So I don't see the results coming through. Moving. Oops.
Yeah, I think it's got it closed. I have no idea what happened to it, but maybe we can just proceed. Yeah.
Yep, we'll just keep moving forward. I know we're on a timeline. So today's workshop is going to share with you some skills, some really basic foundational skills on building resilience. And resilience is our ability to bounce back and grow through challenges. There's a big difference between resilience and grit. Grit is when we muscle through a challenge. Resilience is when we bounce back and grow through it. So we gain some new skills. And we develop habits that help us persevere through other challenges. There's a lot to building resilience, and today we are going to focus on just 3 main essential components. The first being that sleep is essential, practice setting boundaries, and shifting perspective. So if you're feeling like you're burning out, you're struggling, you're fatigued, I really recommend you begin by focusing on your sleep. And we're going to go through pretty quickly through these slides, but you're going to have access to a copy of this presentation as well as the full workshop if you want to dive a bit deeper. So you should have a copy of the PDF of this presentation, and within that is a hyperlink to the full workshop, which is about 45 minutes long on YouTube. Okay, so we're going to just skip the polling piece, but I just want you to reflect for a moment on what your sleep has been like. Let's think about for the last week or two. How would you rate it? I've got to be honest, I would rate mine this week as a racemic mixture. It's been a little bit of a challenge with more moderate stress levels. So go ahead and consider that. And then also consider, what has your week looked like? Have you been under more stress? Is that affecting your sleep? It's really important to ensure that you have good sleep. I can't emphasize this enough. Sleep is our foundation for our wellness and our well-being. I know that I'm a total grump when I don't get enough sleep. It's harder for me to cognitively process. It's harder for me to be creative. And like I said, I'm a grump. I'm just not fun to be around. I think most people are like this when we don't get enough sleep. So I really emphasize and encourage you to prioritize your sleep, particularly if you're going through a tough time or if you are anticipating some stress down the road. Having a good sleep routine and schedule is really critical to that foundation of resilience and wellness. And I have here just a book recommendation, The Sleep Solution. It's written by a neurologist who specializes in sleep. So it's very based in science, and it really changed how I perceive sleep and how I approach my sleep, and gave me some more realistic expectations about it. So I highly recommend it if you are having trouble with your sleep or know someone who is. This is a really great starting point. Okay, some really simple tips to begin with for your sleep. So you want to make sure that you develop a sleep schedule and a routine. Try to go to bed and get up around the same time every day if possible. If you're a shift worker, that's a whole different piece, and Dr. Winters addresses that in the book that I recommended just one slide ago. But trying to keep that routine will really help you in setting that tone. If you work out, increase your workout intensity. That can help you to fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer. If you don't work out, consider incorporating some movement into your day. You can meditate to fall asleep. This is something that I do every night. I meditate. It's part of my sleep routine. And I often fall asleep as I'm meditating during that session. I also meditate every morning. I don't typically fall asleep during that meditation practice. And there are different types of meditations that can promote sleep as well. If you consume caffeine, eliminate it 8 hours before bed, especially if you're sensitive to caffeine. We all react differently to caffeine. We have different biochemistries, but if you're sensitive like I am, you definitely want to take that 8-hour lead time. If you consume alcohol, eliminate that 4 hours before bed. There's a common misconception that alcohol helps you sleep and it promotes sleep, but it's a sedative and it actually will interrupt your sleep cycle a few hours in. And of course, if you're having consistent challenges with sleep, you really should consider working with a medical professional to help you address that and any underlying issues that could be occurring. And then in addition, there's a hyperlink at the bottom of this slide to sleep apps that may be able to help you as well. And I've got a transformational tip here for you. Go ahead and pick one thing that you can try and put it in your calendar and make that commitment to trying it this week to see how you can start to improve your sleep. So if one of these resonates with you, go ahead and give it a try. Oops. Okay, so our next poll, we're just going to reflect on this question. How often do you wake up in the middle of the night feeling panicked, or your brain is just going and you're thinking about what you have to do the next day? You're thinking about maybe what happened the day before. So think about that. It happened to me this week twice, so I would be that second option. And again, I had a moderately stressful week and I was struggling a bit with my sleep. Oops, wrong direction. Okay, so some midnight anxiety, excuse me. So waking up feeling panicked or having a busy mind is a symptom of anxiety. So I have some tips here. This is what I've done in the past and continue to do if it's a challenge to address that. So if I'm overthinking, oftentimes it'll be, oh, I need to do this thing the next day, or I'm starting to go through how I might want to word an email or address something. So if I find that I'm just churning on that, I'll just go ahead and address it right then and there. So if it's something work related, I will email myself at work so I know as soon as I log into my email the next morning, I'm going to see whatever that item is and it's going to get addressed. So now my mind can release it. If I'm worried about forgetting something, I'll set a reminder on my phone for an appropriate time to address it. That way I know that alarm is going to go off, that reminder is going to go off the next day at an appropriate time, and it will get addressed. I don't need to worry about it right now. You can meditate as well. That's very helpful for me. And then just a note on exploring different types of solutions. So there's different types of aromatherapies. I actually have one right here. That's one I've been using lately. I have lavender lotion as well that I use before I go to bed. I sleep with a sleep mask. I use earplugs. I'm what I like to describe as a high maintenance sleeper because I have some auditory sensory issues and a busy mind. So I need to take extra steps in order to have a good restful sleep, and it's a routine that I've committed to. So explore, see what works for you: weighted blankets, earplugs, eye masks. If you are experiencing these sort of panicky moments regularly, then you really need to consider what the root cause of your anxiety is and how you may be able to address it. Because like I said, that is a symptom of anxiety, and it's something that you'll want to address at the root in order to eliminate or minimize it moving forward. Okay, the next question. So that's going to close out our sleep piece. Again, we're moving pretty quickly, but you can revisit this with the slides and with the workshop on YouTube. Now we're going to move into boundaries, setting boundaries. So I'd like you to consider what is, one area in your life where you'd like to, where you'd like to set some better boundaries. So maybe you're feeling overwhelmed in one of these areas. So work or school, professional, academic, family, friends, that social piece, volunteer work or hobbies. Or you may not be sure. You know that you need to create some more space for yourself, but you're not exactly sure what areas. And then maybe your life is just balanced and you don't need to worry about setting boundaries, in any of these areas. Okay, so we're going to do an exercise to set boundaries, to get the ball rolling on that, because I totally recognize if it's not something that is a part of your regular practice, a part of, in your toolbox, a tool in your toolbox, then it may be something that's not comfortable for you or natural. So we're going to start small and build out from there. But I want to emphasize to you that there's just no way to completely eliminate drains and stressors from your life. That's just the nature of life, right? It's always changing. There's always challenges. Challenges are growth opportunities. But there is a lot that we can do to identify and minimize those limiting reagents or those stressors that really don't need to be a part of your journey. So I want to begin by asking you to jot down, either on paper, on your phone, in a Word doc, what are 2 requirements in your life that are sources of stress, and what are 2 non-requirements that are sources of stress? So a requirement would be something like work or school, financial, things of that nature. And then non-requirements. So that could be social relationships, volunteer work, hobbies, things of that nature. So jot down 2 for each. I'm going to pause for a moment so that you can do that. And as we move forward with our exercise, I'd like you to keep in mind, again, if this is a new practice for you, focus on the non-requirements to start. There are definitely lots of ways that you can set boundaries in the requirements in work and school to help you free up time to be more focused on the work that is your priority. And that's a whole other discussion. But we're going to start with our non-requirements to help us build those skills of setting boundaries in sort of those spaces of our lives that we have less of a commitment, so that we can develop that skill and then exercise that skill in the bigger areas of our lives. And for those of you who are not really sure where you need to set boundaries, a really great question to ask yourself, particularly of those non-requirements, is, does it spark joy? If it doesn't spark joy and it's not a requirement, why would you prioritize that? So that's a really great place to start if you are feeling overwhelmed and stretched thin, is those non-requirements that are not sparking joy. Okay, so I'm just keeping an eye on the time, so I don't want to delve too much into every single example here, but I am going to give you some language on setting boundaries. When you set a boundary, it doesn't always have to be an outright no. If it's appropriate, absolutely, go ahead, say no. But if you are trying this out for the first time, or you're trying to be delicate with the relationship or the dynamic, there are definitely some different ways that you can set those boundaries. So the first one being, you can agree to help with a manageable part of that task instead of the entire task. So quick example, someone asks you to help them move. You don't have all day to do that, but you do want to help them for 2 hours. You can tell them what your availability is. I'm available at these times. I'd be happy to help you with that during that window. Or I'd be happy to help with this part, but I don't have the bandwidth for this other piece. You can always try to bring someone else who may be interested and have the bandwidth. You want to, of course, ensure that that person is interested and has the bandwidth before you volunteer them or connect them with someone. But here's another opportunity as well. Think about who could benefit from this? Who could grow from this? I can't do this particular thing, but do I know someone else who might be able to take this opportunity and shine? You can also ask for help. Thanks for thinking of me. I can help with this piece, but I can't do it by myself. Can you work with me on it? Can you team me up with someone to work with? I did that at work recently with a transition. I can no longer take on this project. It's outside of my purview. I will support a new lead in transition for this piece, and very clearly setting what that expectation would look like. And then asking for an extension. Of course I can do that. I'm going to need some extra time though to complete it. And what I'll often follow with is if it needs to be expedited, who can work with me on this, or who can work on this instead, trying to keep that solution-oriented approach. And then, of course, you may notice in this language, there are no apologies. No one is saying, I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize when you set a boundary. You can still do it in a very compassionate, polite, and kind way without apologizing. It's your time. You own it. So for our transformational tip, think about that non-requirement that maybe isn't sparking joy. Or maybe it is, but you need more time to yourself. Select one of these boundaries that you can apply and try it out this week. Saying no to loved ones. I'm just going to go over this one briefly. Setting boundaries, I think the main message I want to share is that setting boundaries is not putting up a wall with someone. It's showing them what healthy access to you looks like, what healthy access for the relationship looks like. It creates a healthy dynamic. Setting boundaries is an act of love, because if you don't set those boundaries and the relationship has conflict or burns out, because there's no healthy framework surrounding it, then you're damaging the relationship. So by setting those boundaries, you're creating a healthy space for yourself and for the people involved. So here's some language. I'm going to leave you to, process that on your own since we are running close to time. But I want to emphasize also that when you are engaging with loved ones, when you lead or close with thank you for being loving and supportive, it sets the tone and the expectation that they should be loving and supportive. And then tell them something, give them a compliment or positive feedback. This is helping me get through a tough time. You're helping me. Thank you. Or I'm excited to reestablish our dynamic. I used that with a close family member very recently when setting some healthy boundaries. I framed it as this is an opportunity for us to reestablish our relationship, and how exciting is that for us, and to create a dynamic we are both excited about and happy about. All right, so that's going to close out boundaries, and now we're going to move into perspective. So I just want you to take a moment and think about how you treat yourself. So how hard are you or critical are you with yourself when you don't meet a target? So 1 to 2, you're doing your best, you're kind and loving. 3 to 4, kind of hard on yourself, trying to be kinder. Or 5, you are hard on yourself. You have high expectations and you'll come down hard on yourself when you don't meet an expectation. I'm at the beginning, I'm that 1 to 2. I've worked really, really hard for years to get there. I was definitely a 5 at the beginning of this growth journey. And now I'd say I'm probably right at that 1, being very kind to myself while maintaining discipline as well. There is a way to find that balance. Okay, so let's begin with just some thoughts on perspective. So your perspective can become your prison or your passport, and that is so true. How we perceive ourselves, the world around us, the work we do, the people that we work with, the people in our lives, really affects how we engage the world and our mental and emotional health. So we're going to do a very quick exercise. I'd like you to begin by making a list of all of your responsibilities, relationships, and challenges. So to begin, responsibilities, we'll go back to those requirements: academic, professional, financial, housing, if wherever you live, that you are responsible for that space, right? That's a responsibility. If you have any dependents, if you have a significant other, a child, a pet, those are all responsibilities. That brings us also into relationships. Relationships are responsibilities as well. They require energy and time and commitment. Even friendships, even casual acquaintanceships require some amount of your time and energy. And then I want you to think about your challenges. We all have our own behind the scenes challenges. Are you working through anxiety, depression, any other mental health challenges, emotional health challenges, physical health challenges? Are you working through something, some type of a relationship challenge? So I want you to just kind of try and get a scope of that, and can keep that at the forefront of your mind. And when you have time, sit with this list and really flesh it out. You'd be surprised how long it is. So I'm sure, like I said, it's a long list. I want you to think about if a dear friend or relative, someone you love, think of someone you love very much. And I always think of my son whenever I think of this, whenever I do these types of exercises. And I think about, what if that person had this list, these responsibilities, right? How would you treat them? How would you think of them? And what would your expectations be of your relationship with them? I'm sure you would treat them well. I'm sure you would think positively of them. If they couldn't meet a goal or an expectation, you probably wouldn't be hard on them. I want you to consider yourself. Take that compassion that you will give to that person who you love so much, you care for so deeply, and give that to yourself as well, because you deserve it. Recognize how much you do. Treat yourself with that compassion. Speak to yourself, internal dialogue, the way you would speak to a loved one. And I would recommend that you sit with this list, flesh it out more. The longer you sit with it, the longer it becomes, and the better scope you have for your responsibilities and your challenges and your relationships. Refer to it when you need to. Keep it on your phone. When you're having a tough time, you find that you're not being too kind to yourself, look at that list. Look at a picture of that loved one and then put them together. How would I treat that person? Why don't I treat myself the same way? Okay, and then just consider for yourself, that we don't have to do this as a poll, which content today was the most helpful for you? Was it optimizing sleep, setting boundaries, or shifting perspective? And then I would encourage you to take whichever piece that was and treat yourself to focusing on that. Focus on it for about a week or two and start to make some changes. Watch that video, the link that I shared, and delve into it a bit more. Sit with the exercises and start to build out those habits of resilience. Thank you so much for having me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to speaking with you during the discussion.
Thank you, Ariana. That was amazing. I loved so much the examples of how to set boundary and how to say no without apologies. That was great, and thank you for everything. And I think our audience will definitely have questions toward the end. Feel free as well to type in your questions from now. All right, so thank you, Ariana. Our next speaker is Lieke van Giesel. Lieke is a graduate student. She's in her She's doing actually her PhD right now. She's in the final stages, ready to write her thesis very soon. And she is actually working in the University of Darmstadt, as well as she is granted the Marie Curie. And back when she started her PhD, it was just when the pandemic hit. So we are very excited to hear your story and the journey you've been through, Lieke. Thank you so much for being with us as well.
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction. I also need to start sharing the screen, so let me just figure this out as well. I hope you guys can see my screen right now.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes, okay, perfect. Well then, welcome everyone. Today I'm gonna share a bit of my story, which starts, oh, how do I go to the next slide now? Perfect, which starts with an introduction of who I am. So I've been involved in international networks of young scientists, specifically young chemists, for a really long time now. I'm currently working, as Fatima mentioned, on my PhD. And during my PhD, I unfortunately got very ill. And one of the realizations that came with this illness is that it was stress amplified. So it wasn't the cause, but it didn't help. And so additional to that, I have been involved in the associations for young chemists since 2017. I have been advocating for chemists in general. And one of the things that I think is very important is the building of your own community. And this means outside of the lab as well as inside of the lab, of course. I have been living abroad for the last 5 years. And today I will be sharing a bit of my personal story. So my story starts with a bachelor that I started in 2013, and it was an amazing bachelor in chemistry. And during this time, I was a member of the student association, where I learned that I'm very passionate about advocating for people and trying to help get everyone the best help they can get. At the end of my bachelor's, I joined the board of the Young Chemist from the KNCV, so the Royal Dutch Chemical Society, and I started 2 masters. And during the second and first master, I joined the European Young Chemist, as you can see in the top, and later on the IYCN, the International Young Chemist. Also in the board for both of them, but also as just a member of these organizations. So this is a bit of my timeline, and probably one of the things that you can notice is that it's ambition driven, and I was really doing a lot of things at the same time. And then after all of this, I started my PhD position as a Marie Curie student, which was very exciting because it meant moving abroad, and I was very happy about this. Of course, this is a big plus. Because you can get to know so many new people and networks and input. So it was a really cool, advantageous thing when I applied for it. However, with the global pandemic, moving abroad became a lot more challenging. So I was moving abroad in a time trying to rebuild my life, reestablish friends in a time when nobody wanted to meet new people because COVID was everywhere. And people already had trouble trying to see their own friends and family. So they weren't really waiting for someone new to join their life. So I had to build my own community and get creative with this. And then, as I mentioned before, at the end of 2021, I got sick. And so my sickness started with a normal pneumonia. I say normal, but in general, pneumonia is not really normal, but it was a normal disease, which unfortunately led to some hospitalization. And this is to do with the fact that I got a brain inflammation. And they're still, to date, not sure what happened. It could have been the medicine they gave me or my immune system. But either way, this was not a great disease to have. After 3 months, I started to recover. I was thinking that I was the normal self again, and then COVID came along. And with COVID and the pneumonia and the brain inflammation and everything, my central nervous system got involved. And due to the amount of stress that I had in the last 5 years, if not more, this was amplified, and I got really, really sick. So as I mentioned, it was stress-induced. It wasn't just the stress, of course, but it was made very much worse by it. And even though it was a horrible period of my life, I am still grateful for it, because I've learned a lot of lessons of this. One of the things that I also want to mention is that the recovery is 3 years for full recovery. And since it was end of 2021, as you can all understand, I'm still not fully recovered. I'm still struggling with this, but I'm trying my best to manage my mental health to make sure that my physical health can stay as good as possible. So some of the lessons that I learned in this period is that no job and no project can be worth my health. This sounds very logical, but it's easy to think, oh, this one thing I can add, it's fine, it's stressful, but it's okay, just add one more thing and keep doing that. I'm sorry, there's something wrong on my side now. I hope this is working. But so you also have to prioritize yourself, of course. There's no limit in what you can do, but there is a limit in what you can do total. So you should not keep adding to your to-do list. And then I have some personal tricks and tips from my point of view, which really, I hope can help you guys. Because if I would do it all over again, knowing what I know now, I would still do a PhD, but I might not have done a Marie Curie PhD, which forced me to go abroad during a global pandemic. For the double degree program, the 2 masters were great, but looking back, it was so much to manage and so much stress. And looking back, I would have probably just done 1 master. Building the community, I would have started with this earlier. I did have a network, but the community outside of the lab and outside of your friends and family is so, so important. And one of the things that I cannot emphasize enough is the social media and journey sharing. Because when I was abroad in a global pandemic, the Instagram that I made myself provided me with a lot of comfort. I was seeing other people sharing their stories, their struggles, and it validated me feeling this way. It wasn't just me. There were other people who were in the same situations that would also open up, and that really made it so much easier. As for the board positions, I would still probably do all of them, but maybe not in the time frame that I set for them. So as for right now, I still have 7 years to join all these board positions, and I decided to do them all simultaneously. And looking back, it would have been better to spread this a bit more. And yeah, time management, it's so, so important to manage your time well. And last on this slide, tips and tricks is speak out about your struggles, because as I said, you're probably not alone in this. Oh, sorry, there was one more. It was about the holidays. What I've learned is when you live abroad, you have the tendency to go home and visit your friends and family during your holidays. And this means that you're not really having holidays where you can just relax and sit on the beach, or whichever holiday you prefer, because most of your holiday days are spent with your friends and family back home. And I think this was one of the pitfalls that, looking back, I should have changed a bit. So what are some things that you should keep in mind if you're a young scientist? One of the things that I think is really important is the imposter syndrome. I felt like such an imposter starting, and realizing and talking more about it, I learned that it's very normal, and there's a lot of people struggling with the exact same feelings. As I said before, social media can be a very supportive and validating environment. So I would highly recommend for a lot of you to look into if this might be a way for you to feel some support and build some community. And so the community outside of the lab is just as important as the community inside the lab. If you move abroad, take care of your mental health. I cannot emphasize this enough. I thought I was prepared. I thought I knew what I was doing. I moved abroad before, and still, due to circumstances like the global pandemic, it was way more challenging than I expected. So this was a really important part that I might have not done as well as I could have. Yeah, plan to take the breaks. It feels like there's never enough time to plan for breaks, but not taking them is not an option. So at some point you have to be kind to yourself and allow yourself to take a break in this period of time, even if it's not convenient. Time management as well. I know a lot of the chemists that I work with have the tendency to stay on the lab the whole time because, you know, there's always new things to test, research keeps going, and therefore there's not enough time to do the administrative works, and they do that in the evening, and that way your PhD is becoming your whole life. And then people are more important than choosing your projects. You have to work with the people, especially if you're doing a PhD postdoc, or even if you want to start your own group. The people are what you're working with. The projects can change over time, but the people will not change significantly throughout you working with them. And don't be too demanding on yourself and know your limits. This sounds very logical, but it's something I struggled with a lot. And yeah, as Lauriane mentioned as well, you should really be kind to yourself as much as possible. And so my take-home message, the thing that I would like to leave you guys with today is don't tell other people, let me know if you need me, because a lot of people who actually do need you cannot say they need you. So instead, assume that you are needed and try and help as much as possible. And with that, I'd like to end my journey for today, and I look forward to the questions later on.
Thank you, Lieke. That's very great perspective. I know that you have so many of those tricks and tips that might help many of people out there. I totally agree with you. With many of them. I studied abroad as well, and it was incredible how choosing a mentor is important, how creating a community that support you, and how to share also your struggles would actually help you, and feeling you are not alone. That's like a very great take-home message. And thank you, Lieke. And I'm sure we will get back to you with a discussion with more, you know, questions and so. All right, so now we're going to be moving on to our third speaker, and our third speaker is Dr. Azmi Ahmed. Here is Dr. Azmi Ahmed. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Azmi. I was also one of the mechanisms to cope for myself, always reading the career columns in Science and Nature, and I got to find you through like one of those podcasts for science. So I really enjoyed hearing about your advocacy efforts and Yale and during your postdoctoral research. So let me introduce you briefly before you get started with your talk. So Dr. Azmi Ahmed is a postdoctoral fellow, as I mentioned, in the Yale School of Medicine. He is working in the cardiovascular molecular imaging laboratory. He received his bachelor degree from Union College and his PhD from Utah University in biomedical engineering. His graduate research focused in electropsychology and biophysics, where he investigated calcium signaling and SR leak and cardiomyocytes. His current research and training under the mentorship of Dr. Mehran Sadiki focuses on translational research using molecular imaging. He has established leadership experience in the postdoctoral community as advocacy committee coordinator at the Yale Postdoctoral Association, the OIPA, as well as the outreach chair and the co-chair at the Yale Black Postdoctoral Association, the YBBA. So we are very excited to hear about those efforts and any resources that are available for mental health help for early career scientists.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Fatima, and thank you to IYCN for the invite to speak. I'm glad to be here, and also thanks to the two previous panelists for sharing their stories and tips. There's definitely a lot of great insights that I hope I can kind of add to. So as Fatima had already alluded, this is kind of my background and who I am. Some of those descriptions are actually a little old, so now I'm just co-chair, and I founded a new committee with YPA, and I also serve on a national scale with the National Postdoc Association as their postdoc council, and just became their advocacy committee vice chair. The reason I say that is also to provide this disclaimer that the views are solely my own. I'm not speaking or giving advice on behalf of any of these organizations. But also I recognize that some of the things that we're talking about will be difficult for people, and we never know what may be stressors or triggers for people. And I'm going to try to be vulnerable today and share some stories of loss and grief as well. So if you find anything I'm saying is stressful, please be kind to yourself and compassionate, and hit that mute button and take a pause if needed. So with that, I wanted to start off by something that actually both of the presenters had alluded to, is that you do not really exist in isolation, right? There's a lot of factors and there's different types of advocacy that can work on. And I wanted to highlight the difference between two equally important advocacies, which is, the first one is community advocacy, which is something that the previous panelists had alluded to, about building your community, advocating for it, establishing programs and activities so that people can come together and help each other. And this can be also very beneficial for sharing resources on mental health and advocacy in general. However, the other equally important advocacy is self-advocacy, right, for your own mind. So you might have things outside of your work that can affect your own mental health that other people in the community can't really help you with, and you have to be able to recognize how to help yourself get through it. And I just like to share my favorite quote relating to self-advocacy from the infamous Donna from Parks and Rec. I don't know if people see it, but treat yourself. And it's not just material items, but treat yourself to mental health breaks, mental health resilience, good sleep, as we had heard earlier as well. And I'll be the first to admit I am guilty of being really good at community advocacy, but was not really good at self-advocacy, and it's something that I'm kind of working on right now. And just as a little background on the community advocacy work that I do, so as part of the YPA and YBPA and stuff, I've always hosted a lot of events related to partnering with organizations on campus, such as Being Well, doing mindfulness, meditation, and then there's a lot of other events that we've hosted: how to care for yourself, how to have a meditation session, where to go when you need help, even community activities like coffee and cookies and things to get together. And during my journey with the YPA and hosting all of these events and partnering with this Being Well Center, I learned about something called Mental Health First Aid, or MHFA. Now, MHFA is a skill-based training course which teaches participants about mental health and substance use issues. And just like similar to physical first aid, you're really there to be the first point of contact for someone who may be experiencing distress or severe mental health issues or substance abuse issues. And some of the things that you learn about this during this course, it's kind of a long, day or 2-day course, is different types of plans. So some of the things that I'll share with you is like this algae plan, which is a 5-point plan that does not have to go in any specific order. But algae stands for A is approach and assess for the risk of suicide, harm, or assisting if people are getting worse. L is to listen non-judgmentally to someone if they need to share with you their struggles, their issues that they're dealing with. And then G is to give reassurance and information if you have it, if you are in a leadership position or you provide workshops and things like that. And then the 2 E's are to encourage appropriate professional help, as well as encouraging self-help and others. So this is really one of the things that I'll focus on, is how you encourage your own self-help and support strategies. And some of the things that I've learned as well is, how do you notice signs and how do you categorize these signs when people are going through something, and how to be able to recognize different behaviors or appearances if someone suddenly changes their appearance and they're going through issues, or the feelings and thoughts. But what was really important to me is not just noticing the signs of your colleagues and people around you, but it's also to notice your own personal signs. But I wanted to also clarify that being a first aider does not give you the ability to diagnose or treat. So it's important to always refer people to the appropriate professional help where needed, which is this other E. And just like being, first aid, giving CPR, you're just there to provide the initial buffer until the professional help comes. So, and noticing these signs for yourself is very important so that it doesn't get to a place where things may go, get really bad. And so, how have I applied this? I wanted to share a couple of my stories just to show different examples of how stressors that happen to you may affect your work. So one of these stories, this first picture, is actually from a little over a year ago, where I was at a conference. And you see me here standing next to the poster, and people are presenting, but you really never know what they're going through. So that same night was the night I had went and found out that my grandfather, also named Azmi, had actually died and passed away from a brain hemorrhage. And this was kind of a struggle moment, because I had gotten the call the day before saying that he's in the hospital. And I wanted to fly out that day, but then I was convinced, like, oh no, you need to present your poster, you're at a conference. And I took an extra 24 hours and it was too late. So dealing with grief is tough, right? So, but luckily enough, I was able to, be there for the funeral, be supporting with my family, noticing my own signs. And then what I noticed is that when I got back to work, I typically used to have tendencies to just kind of bury myself in work long hours, pretend like everything is fine. But I was definitely, I'll share some tips in the next slide of how did I apply some of these mental health first aid techniques to realize that, no, I need to change things so that I can be more comfortable with it. And so this is just one example of, a sudden kind of moment or event that kind of can cause you mental health issues. However, I also wanted to share another example of how memories and past traumas from maybe decades ago can also creep up on you. So it's not necessarily that, oh, I had a sudden event and I am now experiencing, mental health issues or issues in general, but it can be something that slowly creeps up on you. And so I wanted to also share this other story, and this very fuzzy picture right now, but this is actually a picture from, I believe, in the late 90s. And this is when I was a kid in Gaza. And, with all the current events and setting politics aside, and considering that I had even moved out 20 years ago, way before Hamas and all the politics have happened, I still have core memories of like raids and having to shelter from airstrikes and all of that. And then just witnessing these events unfold are very stressful for someone. And I'm starting to notice signs of anguish, helplessness, and even survival guilt that can come even decades later. And so this is, of course, also affecting my ability to go to work, just being able to focus, being able to be there for my friends and community. And this is just kind of another example of how do you try to notice things that may be affecting you from the outside world? Because as I said before, we don't really exist in isolation and vacuum. And we can try to pretend, like we're all professional and we're attending webinars, but each one of us is going through things. Each one of us is witnessing events that are occurring around the world and around your own direct vicinity that will be affecting you. And it's important to recognize and, how to deal with that. So how did I deal with this? Well, one of the tips that we got was to develop self-care plan, which you can start by brainstorming people, programs, and activities within different domains. So this is kind of an action plan in general here that kind of talks about different aspects. And within each one of those, depending on what suits you, what works for you, you can brainstorm people, programs, and activities. So what do we mean by that? So people, for example, partners, families, and sponsors. And when I say sponsor, I'm not talking about a mentor. I'm not talking about your PI. A sponsor is someone that is invested in your success. They are not someone that talks to you. They're someone that talks about you to other people, and they are there to provide support. So it's very important, if you don't have partners and families, to identify who your sponsors are within your academic circle and within your institutional. I've been very lucky enough to have a wonderful supporting partner who has always been there and checks in on me, and family that I can call and check in with. But these are the type of people that you can share these experiences with and try to be more vulnerable with. And I guarantee you they will come around and ask about you just to provide you support. Then the next thing is like programs. So you can volunteer at organizations. You saw I had a pretty long list of different organizations that I work with. And a lot of times you don't have to take up like leadership roles and take up things, but just, signing up for things and attending events, attending workshops like what you're doing right now. These are all things that can help you feel less isolated, especially when you're at an early career stage. I know in postdoc, things get really isolating because in grad school, you have classes, you have students, things you do, but once you get into postdoc, you're kind of just research and that's it. So I encourage people to go explore these programs that can help you connect with others. And then activities can be anything creative or non-creative. So writing, drawing, meditation. When I was kind of struggling with grief, I was trying to get into more, using Headspace and meditating and working out. And then I also put some of it into a creative outlet by writing the science article that Fatima had mentioned about how to express that grief that I have and how to actually put it into something useful and something that I can actually be kind of proud of as well, instead of just dealing with it on my own. And with that, I think I'm on time. So thank you. And I guess we can take questions, or I'll turn it back to Fatima.
Thank you, Azmi. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story, and all the support for you and your family. And I know there are so many people now in pain. So thank you again for sharing your tips. And I think now we can all come back to this room, and Loriana, Lieke. Hi, everyone again. All right. Hi. So I think now we can have a Q&A discussion. I think we got a couple of questions from our audience. So first question from Radwan. He's asking, actually, maybe like you already touched base on that, but like maybe we can hear all of your views again about this one. He asked about how to cope and control the stress when the stressors come in our daily tasks, such as work burden, how to keep ourselves always in a positive mode. Is that something possible, actually? Anyone would like to take the little...
Maybe I can start by saying it's okay to not always be in a positive mode. I think it's okay for you to realize that, hey, I am in a negative space, feel the emotions, and try to then later like realize that it's ups and downs and you can't always be in a positive mode. So then I'll let maybe the other panelists add on to that as well.
Yeah, for me personally, if something happens negative or something else in the working environment, what I do is I give myself an hour or a day, however is appropriate, but it's fine to feel that way. So I'm also supervising students. Sometimes something goes wrong, it's missed in translation, whatever, and always try to tell them too, like, hey, we're just gonna take 2 hours. In these 2 hours, we're gonna feel these feelings, it's all fine. We're just going to be annoyed by it. It's not towards you, it's not towards me. It's just the general situation. It's annoying. It's okay to feel that. After 2 hours, we're going to let this go and it's going to be okay. We're going to restart, we're going to regroup, and we're going to go wherever we need to go. So that's my way of dealing with it. Yeah, that's my point of view. Maybe Lorianne also has some ideas.
So I like to frame things as red, yellow, or green. So if I'm having a red light moment where, instead I try not to say negative, to assign those words to my feelings or experiences. If I'm having a red light moment, which causes me to stop, then it's an opportunity for me to check in with myself. So what's going on here? Where in my self-maintenance routine or self-care routine am I missing some pieces that, I don't have the skills in this moment to navigate this red light. So it helps me check in with myself, but also I really, I think, the human brain, we like to control things. So I definitely go into that control mode where I'm like, okay, what can I do right now to deal with this? And one thing for me is making sure I'm eating enough, because when I don't eat enough, I'm not cognitively there, I'm grumpy, right? That can help me quickly reset. So we each have our own thing. So identifying something that can soothe you in that moment. And then also I will jump right into my prioritization list, my to-do list. How do I navigate this? What can be moved to tomorrow or even next week so that I can make space for this unexpected thing that just popped up? And where can I build in a break? Like Lieke was mentioning, I need a moment. I need to take a step back. So where can I build that into my schedule in this moment? Just a few thoughts.
Great. Speaking about the priority list, how do you actually work with time management around that, like in general?
So for me personally, communication is key. So if most of us are part of a team, right? So having that information, and I have on my website a grad school survival workshop, and that workshop is great for early career scientists and engineers as well, and it goes into detail about prioritization and communication with your team. So I'll just briefly speak to, you want to understand the moving parts as much as possible for any project that you're on. So communicating openly and directly with your team, I don't think you can ever over communicate, will really help sort of tease out those limiting reagents that we mentioned before, so that you can identify them, address them, plan for them as much as possible. Of course, we're going to have some entropy, right? That's life, but as much as possible. And then what I do is I generate to-do lists for every week, every day. You can even go out month, quarter, whatever works best for your flow, for your project. And then I do my best to make them very realistic and include time for entropy, because things are going to pop up that you don't expect, right? And so you don't want to have a blocked out schedule. Oh, and then one more tip I have is, if you have an experimental day or a day where you really need to focus on data analysis, block your calendar off completely so nobody can book you. That way you don't have to worry about, oh, now I have a meeting in the middle of the day and I was supposed to be laser focused on this one thing. That was a lot I just threw out, so I'm going to go ahead and pause.
That's great. Any other suggestions?
I mean, for me, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So please feel free to say. For me, what I like to do is every Monday I sit down and I make a plan for the lab. And in the beginning, when I started my PhD, I would plan for 100% of the time, which was a big mistake because, as you know, like, stuff comes along. So what I try to do is, on the Monday, I try to plan my week. I try to plan about 70% and count that as 100, because 30% is people asking for help, is unexpected results, unexpected PowerPoints that you need to make, reports that are due that people forgot about. So I try to plan for about 70%, and then you have the flexibility for the other 30%. And my last thing that I always try to do is, on Monday, after I make my planning, and the same time the students or the people that you have to supervise make their planning, and then we sit down for 10-20 minutes and discuss, hey, what are moments in time that you need me? So I can block that in my schedule too. And of course, there's still some unexpected stuff, but this way you can be as prepared as possible for your week, and then have the flexibility as well.
And I would add that, like, I agree with all of that. I personally, in my schedule, a lot of like small things pop up where I don't necessarily need to dedicate a lot of time, but it just kind of piles up. So I try to also plan. I have like kind of a daily what I'm doing, what I need to do, and I'll kind of put like a follow-up or something to do, and I try to check that off by the end of the week. But I also try to approach things where, I have like a 5-minute rule. If something takes less than 5 minutes, I just stop what I'm doing, I get it done, and I move on, so that I can feel that I've kind of finished off as much as possible before I have to dedicate like longer time. So I also think sometimes you might need to have, little mini pockets of productivity, which is still better than like just trying to dedicate like 4 hours. So like writing a manuscript and you're just kind of having writer's block, which is, very real, instead of just like not just, when you're running experiments. So sometimes it's like, oh, I have to, especially if you're doing volunteer activities and stuff like that, there's a lot of times there's emails, flyers, things that need to be sent out. And I try to get those done as I'm working, and then kind of go back at the end of the day and see like, okay, well, what do I have left, and things like that. But that's a huge problem in academia, and I think a big part of why people kind of jump ship and go to other places is that work-life balance. And that to-do list is, you really have to recognize that to-do list is never going to finish. You're never going to get to the end of your to-do list and be like, I'm done for the day. So recognizing that and being okay with that and finishing what you can and moving on to the next is a big part of it too for me.
That's great. I like the idea of mini pockets of productivity. That's great. And I think one of the things I also use on my to-do list is actually try to break it down into tiny, small kind of pieces. So when you finish one thing, you're like, hey, this is like an achievement, you know? So instead of having, I want to write my thesis, and then writing my thesis is going to take months, right? So we'll break it down like a couple of sentences in the introduction, for example, and so on and so on. So if you like, check mark, and so on. That's great. Great ideas. All right, so I think we do have one question for you, Lieke, and that is about social media and how you can express yourself through social media and share your struggles as well, learn from others too. How you can, this question from, I'm not sure who's the person who asked this question, but this question is about how actually to handle social media and not become and not become like a distraction, or you could have been also been exhausted out of it, of using it during the process. What do you think about that? How to have the balance, I would say.
No, I fully agree with that. And I think social media is something that can be a workshop on its own. Like, of course, it's very challenging for all of us. For me, I think there's a difference between creator social media and already like just watching and joining social media. So if you want to become a creator like I am, it might be good to start looking into the community that you want to be part of. And if it's creator specifically, stuff that I do is, for example, plan time slots also for making some videos or some posts, some tips and tricks, stuff like that. And see it kind of as a side job, because if you are going to do it all the time, it will take over your life. And it has the tendency to take over your life because you have the phone in your pocket, so it goes everywhere with you. Also try to realize what is helpful content. So this is one of the things that I learned in social media, is a lot of scientists specifically will share information that they deem important, and that would be similar as an article where you're just trying to give the information. And for social media, it's more important that you look at the other person and see what could the value be for them if I post this, or how can I help other people see the problems and solve them. And so if you're in that mindset already, if you're thinking about it, write some things down. I have it during my lab day that normally I take some pictures when I'm making some stuff. That doesn't mean that I instantly post it, but I have it on my phone, and then once I make a post, I can use some of these pictures later on in my scheduled time slot. So that's how I manage it, and that's what I would recommend to the person as well.
Great, thank you. All right, so I think maybe we can have like a question, because once we advertise this webinar, I kind of recognized as well how important to incorporate mental health in our academic preparation. We all came from academic background. Azmi and Lieke and Loriana, you are all still in the academia as well. And we know how, you know, grad school could be like stressful, postdoctoral as well, stage could be stressful as well. How do you think academic, let's say, professionals would be prepared and trained to handle stress now and in the future? Because those folks who are we creating now, they're going to be the new generations of researchers and professors. Do we really need to have this incorporated in our academic preparation? What do you think about that?
I mean, if it's okay, I would like to start because this is really important for me too. So I have a lot of opinions about the academic world, which is also why I'm advocating in the international and European membership, like the communities. I think we have to look at more of the person behind the research. And I think in the last decades, the research was the #1 priority. And I think we have to demand this switch to look behind the person. And this is in multiple areas, not just mental health, but we should be trained in mental health in normal, during your bachelor, during your master. How do you take care of this? How do you organize it? As much as, for example, the trainings in plagiarism, like it's just as important, if not more important. And I see this for the mental health. I see this for the research and supervising some people. I think it should be very important that we also advocate for communication and teaching people how to teach, and teaching people how to communicate. And all these things are intertwined, because if we can create better teachers and better academic mindsets even, hopefully we can create an academic world in which the person is central and the research is the bonus, which for me would be the utopia for the academic world. I think this is really important.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have a few as well. So I totally agree. I think there is actually a recent talk I gave for Association of like American Medical Colleges, and they were asking us to talk about what are the challenges with research in graduate school and postdoc. And it really came down to the fact that a lot of academic institutions, funding agencies, focus on investing in research and producing a lot of papers, producing a lot of results, but there really needs to be kind of a shift to investing into the researcher themselves as individuals, and providing the support that is needed so that you can have researchers that are actually content and have a good quality of life. That includes, aside like mental health, absolutely training, but also standardizing those benefits across different schools and across different departments and so on and so forth. And I think a real big struggle for graduate students and postdocs specifically is that we're often kind of in that no man's land where we're also looked at as, from an institutional perspective, I'd say we're kind of looked at as people that are getting paid. We're not really bringing funding. We're not bringing money into the school. We're not undergrads paying tuition. And so we don't often get the same amount of benefits and the same amount of things as undergraduates or even faculty. And then it varies school, by funding agency. So this has been a real struggle when working on a national scale for advocacy for postdocs and saying, oh, well, we want like a minimum salary so people can afford childcare. You know, if you have childcare, you're going to be a lot less stressed in your life when you have to go to work and have to take care of a child. So I think all of those are absolutely critical to standardize over the next, few years, so that the next generation that comes in has had that practice, has that job security. Otherwise, I think, academia is going to be kind of in a bubble. I would say that there are already postdoc shortages. There's already a lot of graduate students that are like leaving and not staying because of the quality of life and that quality compared to the amount of stress and work that we get. So I think mental health training, inclusive training, making programs available for postdocs and graduate students so that they're not just limited to, faculty and undergrads. I think those are all critical to make sure that, everyone has a good quality of life.
Great. Doriana, do you have any thoughts about that?
I completely agree with all the points that have been shared by the other panelists. And my part of my mission with Radiant Journey is to shift the culture toward one of focusing on oneself, right? Whatever that entails, mental health, emotional health, physical health. And one of the things that I've seen is in industry, I find that I have, clientele in industry offering this as professional development, and I think it's a critical piece of it. I also feel strongly that it should be part of curriculum, because we have, our academic institutions preparing us, for the research, for that piece of it, for, as scientists and engineers, but we don't see, and this is, within STEM as well as other fields as well. But, obviously our area is STEM, where we're not seeing that piece in the curriculum. This should be standard part of curriculum in undergraduate and graduate school, in the lower levels as well. In my opinion, I'm teaching my son meditation already. He's 7 years old. It's critical. And so one of the things that I do with my business to make it more accessible is that I offer it to academic organizations deeply, deeply discounted, because that's where I started. And I understand it's difficult to prioritize the funding. So doing as much as you can with support groups, within, you know, your chemistry department or whichever department you're a part of, having that community like Lieke was talking about, you know, that's really, really critical, because unfortunately the funding just isn't there, or isn't being prioritized often, at least what I'm seeing across, you know, academic organizations. But there's a critical need, and we don't want to lose really valuable, brilliant scientists and engineers from our field because they're burning out. You know, that's really, we can't afford that. So I completely agree. I think it's a huge priority, and thank you for prioritizing it with today's webinar. I love that, you know, seeing that culture shift and seeing that open dialogue and vulnerability is just such a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Anytime. I totally agree with you indeed. We had a recently IUPAC conference in the Netherlands where the younger chemists had actually a joint program, the IYCN, EYCN, and the Dutch Dutch Chemical Society. And we had a professional development program, and they were fabulously attended. One of those sessions were about mental health, and I was amazed, to be honest, how was its full capacity. It was like totally full capacity, and I was like, oh, now people are more eager to learn and more even open to share their experiences. And they were like, okay, it's okay to say that I am imposter. I have, as Lieke said, speaking about the imposter syndrome, actually, we do have a question over here from one of our audience attendees, and I think maybe we can have this as a final question, and hearing from you how to handle imposter syndrome among a graduate student. It seems that he's a graduate student. So how to cope with this feeling that you actually don't fit and you don't belong?
I don't know if it was specifically directed to me, but I can start if you guys agree. One of the things, as I said as well, it was something I struggled with a lot. And luckily for me, as I mentioned, I joined a European Young Chemist during the end of my bachelor, beginning of my master. And during those meetings, I was meeting with people, in my mind, amazingly far in their career. Not just postdocs, but even like assistant professors, associate professors, so many people so much further in their career. And whenever I started feeling insecure, these were my friends. So I felt secure enough to open up to them. And once I did, I realized that even as a bachelor or even as a master or PhD or professor, you feel imposter syndrome. And so that validation for me to open up and listen to friends of mine who are associate professors at one of the best universities I can think of, saying that they feel imposter syndrome, saying that they feel like, hey, maybe there's other people out there, maybe I'm not the person who's correct for this job. That was really helpful for me to understand that it's so important to speak up about this. And then the other side for me was, I talked about this with my PI, with my professor. And one of the things he said is, one, there was never validation. Nobody's ever said, hey, what are you doing here? So it was all in my head. And two, he said, we hired you for a reason. There were other applicants. It wasn't like you were the only person there. So they chose me because they believed I was the best person for the job. And so anytime, even now, when those thoughts pop into my head, I go to those thoughts and realize like, hey, they believe in me, so maybe I should try that too. And it's not to devalidate these feelings, because I think everyone has them, but it's to rationalize them, as Lori mentioned in her webinar, to rationalize them to such a degree that it's okay to feel this way, but it's not the truth. But that's my point. I mean, I look forward to hearing from both of you as well.
Great ones. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Gloria.
I have a super quick exercise to combat this. So when we have imposter syndrome, it's because we're being limited by beliefs, right? So limiting beliefs. And that's clouding our perspective. Remember, we talked about perspective earlier. There's a lot of different things you can do with perspective. A really quick exercise that you can try to combat this and dismantle your limiting beliefs is to go ahead and make a list. Take 3 of them. So I love the example of this new job, right? When I transitioned into higher ed, that's how I felt. When I transitioned into the crime lab, that's how I felt, right? So we have this new opportunity, new experience. We might be questioning our capabilities. So go ahead and, write down 2 or 3 limiting beliefs that you have. So that might be, well, I don't think I'm intelligent enough. I don't think I'm smart enough to do this job, whatever, right? So you go ahead and take that first one. I'm not smart enough. And then I want you to go ahead and disprove it with facts. So you're a college graduate, right? Or a high school graduate, or wherever you are, right? In your journey. And you take that and you disprove it. Like Lieke said, I was hired for this job, right? I was selected. Not only did I feel confident enough to apply for it, but the hiring team also felt very confident that I was the best fit, right? So you go ahead, take your limiting beliefs, dismantle them with 3 counterpoints that are facts that prove it. Work with a loved one or a trusted confidant if you need some help, because sometimes we don't, not sometimes, always, we don't have the same perspective, right, as those who perceive us. And then I want you to take those counterpoints and make them affirmations for yourself. So go ahead, put them on Post-it notes, stick them all over the place, write them down in your planner, out for a few months so that you're going to be surprised when you see them. Set reminders on your phone, engage with them, read the list of affirmations before you go to bed, read them in the morning. Those are your personalized affirmations, and over time, the neural pathway that your brain's been going down telling you you're not good enough or not whatever enough, it's going to start to get rewired, and you're going to start going down those positive pathways toward those affirmations and in a better, healthier perspective.
Yeah, and I would add that I agree with all of those about, sharing your feelings and realizing, what progress you've made. And it's also important, just to add, is to let go of that concept of perfectionism. And, like, even if you're not a genius, you're still smart enough. And what really matters is not comparing yourselves to other, because each person is on kind of their own trajectory. And as long as you're doing better now than you were, then there's nothing to be an imposter about. There's nothing, it's not a failure. And even if there is, then you also should celebrate your failures and your successes and learn from them. I think people have a tendency to always remember the awful parts of an experience or of a field or something, but you don't often try to remember when was it good? When did you achieve something? And like it was said, remembering that you were selected for this. And also, like, I think one final point I make that I think Lori mentioned earlier was like addressing the root cause of why you're feeling that way. So just going back to mental health in general, imposter syndrome is absolutely a root cause of declining mental health or issues. Is it academic harassment? Is it lack of stability? Is it the childcare? Is it whatever? And having to identify that will make sure that you can take the right steps to kind of overcome it, including things such as
I think you disconnected.
imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, you were disconnected for a short while, Azmi. Thank you. Oh, any final message for our audience?
Oh, sorry.
Final message, 10 seconds.
I mean, I would say, like, really prioritize your mental health. And the quote that I had as a take home, like, assume that people need you just as you need other people. Really try to help as much as possible.
Azmi?
I mean, I would say take care of yourself. And like I was saying, try to figure out what the root cause is and make sure you reach out to people. You are not alone. Ask for help, because just like everybody was saying, people may not reach out to you, so you may not reach out to others, but you would like them to reach out to you, right? So the same way that you would like those people to reach out when they need help, they feel the same way, that they want you to reach out when you need help. So ask for help, find a community, find your support system, and you're not alone. So
that would be it.
I love that. Thank you, Loriana.
You are the most important element in your life. Treat yourself like you would a loved one.
Great, thank you, Loriana. Thank you, Lieke. Thank you, Azmi. That was wonderful. I'm really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our audience as well did. And I'm very happy that you were able to be with us today. And please take care of yourself. And I know there's, like as Azmi said already, every one of us has a background behind. So we are here today, but definitely we have our own stuff to deal with. And take care of yourself. And as usual, it's great to have a